Hello listeners, and welcome to Season 3 of the Cult Vault podcast. I'm your host Casey, and this season we're diving deeper than ever before. Having completed my Masters in the Psychology of Coercive Control at the University of Salford, we'll be exploring not only the hidden world of cults, but also the expansive influence of coercive control in various settings. This season involves sensitive themes and discussions with survivors of coercive environments. Listener discretion is advised. If you find these topics difficult or disturbing, please visit cultvaultpodcast.com for links to supportive resources. To enhance your listening experience and support this work, consider joining Patreon at patreon.com/thecultvault. Members get early access to ad-free episodes, exclusive goodie bags, merchandise, invitations to our monthly video calls, plus a special shout-out for supporting the show. You can now link your Patreon account to Spotify, combining free and exclusive content, all in one convenient place. Don't forget to support the show by leaving a review on your favourite podcast player. Every review helps us reach more listeners and expand this community. And for true crime enthusiasts, CrimeCon UK is returning to London on June the 7th and 8th, 2025. It's the ultimate event for anyone interested in leading true crime guest speakers, book signings, and CSI experiences. I'll be there too, and I'd love to see you there. You can use the code CULT, C-U-L-T, at the checkout for 10% off your tickets at crimecon.co.uk, or you can follow the link in the episode description. Now, with all of that said, let's dive in to today's episode. Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Cult Vault podcast. I'm your host, Casey, and I am joined today by Bart and Alan Stewart. Hi, Bart. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yes, well, I have written a novel. I have been writing much of my long life, fiction, literary fiction. And I've always been also interested in the subject of cults. And there are some stories as to why. I've never been in one myself. I've never lost one to anyone. I call myself a concerned citizen. And a big part of what I want to talk about today is how come there aren't more concerned citizens dealing with all of this? I think this societal neglect is appalling on this subject. But as I say, I'm a writer, and there happens to be this. Maybe you can see there. This is my novel, The Contraption. It's available on Amazon and Amazon UK and a lot of other online retailers. And what it is, Casey, is a literary novel that deals with a cult experience. And not just the person in the cult, but the family that is trying to locate this person who has been relocated. This is a bad cult. This is not cult light. This is not cult-ish. This is hardcore. Virtually the worst of what I've... See, again, maybe I got ahead of myself. I've been studying cult psychology and tactics and the cult scene for a long time. Now, not constantly. When I tell people, when I started with all of this, they say, well, good grief, you must be an absolutely obsessed man here. I haven't, spent every day of the time since the Jonestown massacre studying and poring over cult material. But that's when it began. I was 19, and I sat down for dinner to watch Walter Cronkite and the news, and lo and behold, the story, it blew my mind, as it has, so many people. And anyway, that's where it started. That's where it began, in my case, the interest in this dark subject. And I read as much as I could find about it. And of course, in those days, there wasn't a whole lot. And that raises an interesting point, and there's so many interesting little side notes on this subject. But, you talk to some people and they say that it began basically in the 1960s. The first cults were in the 60s. but, it came out of the counterculture or something. And I don't think so. I mean, I see this pattern going way back.
Yeah. I've been looking at cults from ancient Egypt, different kind of.
I was just about to say, how about the pharaohs? But now it evolves and changes and gets more sophisticated, and I think that's what happened in the 60s. But Lifton's book dealt with the Korean War and the Chinese brainwashing techniques, and of course that would have had to have had a longer history. I mean, it didn't come about fully fledged at that point. They had been working on that for a long time. So anyway, I'm digressing, and I do that. I go all over the place.
This is so great, though, because I've been finishing my master's in the psychology of coercive control, where we had to kind of almost chronologically go through this study material. I have not spoken to many people that were experiencing these things in real time, like seeing Jonestown and things coming on the news, and Margaret Singer and Janya Lalage publishing cults in our midst, and you already being aware of who Singer is because she also wrote about her time studying communist China. So yeah, please digress. This is fascinating to me.
Well, I mean, I'm sort of an unusual case here in that I don't call myself an expert. But as I talk to people just, casually and on the street and here and there, hell, I'm beginning to wonder if maybe I ought to start calling myself an expert and that goes to what I was talking about a moment ago about the just appalling apathy and ignorance and just the societal neglect of a hugely consequential issue here. I mean, the spin-off effects, the spin-off damage from these groups is immense. And then you have to, and this is what really, I think, supercharged my interest in all of this, is when I finally made the connection that the same pattern that you see defining a cult also defines abusive domestic situations, at the micro level. And then the macro level is what? Dictatorial, repressive regimes, governments, dictatorial, authoritarian governments. So that's the macro. The guy beating up his wife is the micro, or I shouldn't just say beating up because it's not always comes to that, but controlling every aspect, the controlling part. That's what I'm getting at. And of course, it's not always the guy doing it to the woman, and of course, same-sex relationships too. You can see it. You can find the abusive thing happens way too much, and that's part of. And it's part of the problem. And Stephen Hassan was talking about human trafficking as being. I mean, that's almost another subset of it. These pimps with their prostitutes, they're using the same pattern. But anyway, it hit me finally that the pattern of all of this is a defining formula, if you will, for an awful lot of the evils of this world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like a Rosetta Stone or some sort of template for defining. Now, not every human evil. I'm not saying that, but boy, a lot of it.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Well, I think of all the wars that have been fought over these dictatorial governments, which are nothing but cults, in my view. What was the Third Reich but a cult that was allowed to get out of hand? And they would all go that way if they were allowed to, see, or a lot of them would. I mean, there's a spectrum. There's Stephen Hassan says an influence continuum. In other words, some of them are worse than others, okay? And then at the far end, there's the most damaging.
Yeah. I completely agree. I talk about all of the time. It's definitely my soapbox. Undue influence, thought reform, indoctrination, radicalization, coercive and controlling behavior. The definitions all essentially point to the same pattern of behavior, the same methods and tactics that psychologically manipulate, control, and exploit people. And so I think what you're saying there is kind of like a nice little summary of what the podcast has been trying to say for a really long time now. And you do look at those themes very, very well in the Contraption. I had to keep reminding myself it was actually not autobiographical or based on a true story. I had to think to myself, Bart's probably used elements of what he's learned over the years about real situations and adapted all of those things into one book.
I have read my weight in cult memoirs, and I put it together in this novel. And I've had very encouraging, very enthusiastic response from former cult members. I mean, they said, some of them said they couldn't believe that I was never in one. Well, I was never in one, but I've read and I've talked to people. And so, I mean, there've been some great war novels written by people who never went to war.
I guess that's a good way of wording it. Yeah, going to war. You developed an interest in the subject of cults, and then through our conversations, I've learned that you started to attend conferences and talks that were also trying to educate wider audiences about the same thing.
Well, I joined early on. I joined the Cult Awareness Network, the original Cult Awareness Network. This is how far back this goes, And I'm sure you know the story of what happened to them, correct?
I do, but some of the listeners might not know.
Well, and I don't know every... It is infamous, and I don't know every detail. But, basically what happened was Scientology sued them out of existence. And they found some kind of a judge that would not only side with them totally, but he also let them purchase or basically take the name Cult Awareness Network. So there is still a group called the Cult Awareness Network. And if you dial them up...
run by a cult.
You call them up on their hotline, and you're talking to a Scientologist. So, there's that. I was a supporter, of the original Cult Awareness Network before it went away. It was taken away. And that story probably needs, there needs to be, somebody needs to come out with more details on that than I have to give you, because I know there are a lot of details. And I'm not, I just sent them money and got their newsletters and took their educational services and so forth. I wasn't like on the board or, privy to all that was going on. But basically what I know is what I just told you. So after the Cult Awareness Network, it was a while before I discovered the ICSA. And so I established a membership with them. And I've done some volunteer work for them, trying to promote some of their books. There is one, this is an incredible book that they put out very recently, If I Could Turn Back Time. And it's several, I'm not sure exactly how many, several chapters or pieces by former cult members saying what they would say to themselves if they could, in other words, go back in time and talk to themselves prior to joining a cult. And it's some of the most poignant reading I think I have ever read in fiction or nonfiction or anything. So it's one that I really recommend, If I Could Turn Back Time. And it's just a publication of the ICSA. Apparently there's not I don't think there's an editor name. No. just a International Cultic Studies Association book. But we were doing a little promotion for that. And then there was a big book that was aimed at Christians who have abusive pastors or any sort of spiritual abuse, as they called it. And that was called Wounded Faith. And that was another multi-author book. It was people talking about that. And, oh, boy, I tell you, we need to talk sometime about the book business, and because I know a lot of your audience would, probably be into writing and maybe self-publishing and all of that. I'm not, one of these people selling a service or anything, but I've been through the mill, and I could sure talk about it. The promotion of books is the most daunting and near impossible thing I can think of. I don't want to spend a whole lot of our time on that now, but it's incredible. And I worked calling radio stations, trying to get interviews for the Wounded Faith authors, or some of them, And, I mean, I don't know how many radio stations I called, and it was just nothing. It was like, one or two or three. I don't remember how many we got, but it was just a handful. And it's like people don't want to touch this subject. But beyond that, I don't think, it's like you have to be a superstar before you'll get any kind of promotional work. These traditional publishing houses, they don't promote new authors, They give all their promotional push to Stephen King and guys who don't need it. That seems to be the requisite for getting promotional work out of a traditional publisher, is if you do not need it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's a mess. I don't know what the answer is.
I wish I had one. I would probably see if it translated into the podcast business as well.
I'm sure it's very similar. Probably all of the arts, but it's especially tough for authors because if you have a piece of music or a painting or something, well, you can just instantly give someone a demo of that. A novel? Try to convince somebody to sit down and read a novel of yours. Yeah.
Especially the world is so busy at the moment, and everybody is kind of doing two or three things at the same time. And I know that's definitely how I work. I tend to listen mostly to, I listen to audiobooks, or I'll listen to, I have a text-to-speech app that I can run PDFs through because I'm like folding the washing and getting the kids' stuff ready for school. And
audiobooks are huge. I don't have this out in an audiobook. It's a digital, an ebook and a paperback. But I probably people have said you need to record it. You need to. So
yeah,
maybe someday
the voice for it as well. I imagine it would be something to listen to. I always love and prefer to listen to authors read their own works because they just understand the writing better than anybody else does.
Right.
So,
they know where to put the emphasis and so forth. Of course, a lot of them don't have I thank you for what you said, but there's nothing worse than an audiobook of somebody mumbling for anyway.
So the subject of spiritual abuse, I can imagine, would be a difficult one to put out in the media and hope for some sort of support from radio networks and news stations, because it's the same with like lawmakers and policymakers and law enforcement and anybody else that you're like, hey, let's do something about spiritual abuse. It's kind of like banging your head against a brick wall, especially when you have so many people coming to you asking where they can access support and where they can access help. And you've just mentioned the International Cultic Studies Association, which used to be called American Family and Friends. Is that right?
It was something like that, yeah, originally. they've been around. Listen, they've been around over 40 years.
A really long time. Yeah, a really long time. And they made that name change in 2004. So did you come across the ICSA before or after that time?
I was not ever familiar with the American Family, whatever it is, of what the name was. I only knew the ICSA.
You started to attend conferences, the yearly conference?
I've always been unable to go. I am going to move heaven and earth to go to the next one. But I've been to some local conferences. The big one is held once a year, but then they also have smaller, more local type conferences.
Right. Yeah. I have yet to go in person to a conference myself, but I do hope that there will be time for that. I'm sure there'll be time for us both, especially if it's location ideal. One day they may just happen to be down the road.
Yeah. Well, the next one is in Montreal.
Yeah, not quite down the road.
No. And I'm in Massachusetts, so it's not too bad for me. So I'm going to hopefully be able to attend that one.
The Contraption is a book that is fictionalized, but it has elements of what I can notice are real life stories. I think I know what some of the primary influences perhaps are in the book. I don't want to say for sure, but I wondered if you could just talk the listeners through the premise of the book and then perhaps do some readings from the book.
I would love to, because the reading, that really conveys, that's my whole project. That's what, the writing is what I bring to all of this. Otherwise I'm just a guy who sends in a little money to ICSA now and then. But, the premise is that a couple, young man and woman, are and pinned down the ages. I think the woman is late 20s and the man is early 30s, so they're not teenagers or anything. But they've been dating and they're going to get married. And he is in the army, getting discharged out of the army, and that's when they're going to get married. He had been a military policeman for many years and went to Afghanistan. And I chose that as his background because I wanted to show what he had to go through in dealing with what happens. His fiancée is recruited into a cult, and he has to decide, well, is he going to move on and just try to get over it, or is he going to try to find her and talk to her? He chooses the latter. And I wanted to show him as a very resourceful, very dedicated, disciplined, professional guy, and he's in top physical condition. And the reason for that is because then, and I even had him make this observation, he says, look, I'm pretty much at the top of my game here. What about the average person dealing with all this? Mm-hmm. What about a poor family in this situation? So he's not alone either. He has some of her family helping him. His sister and her boyfriend are college students, and they're very intellectual types, and they get involved. And so there's a whole cast of supporting characters here. And then they find these cult experts, so to speak, researchers, they call themselves. But I never have them make a connection with a proper group like the ICSA, which, by the way, does have counselors that are listed. They're not part of the ICSA, but they can, there's resources or something like that on the website. So they never found that. They just found this guy, probably some more along the lines of me, who is, does not call himself an expert. And, that's about all there is for a lot of people in this situation, if even that. For a lot of them, there's nothing. And that's a big part of what I am trying to say in this book, is how little there is to help people in this situation. It's shameful I mean, it's horrible. This wealthy country, and we have nothing to help people in this situation. Indeed, we have cults lobbying Congress to, have their... Sure. Are you kidding? Absolutely. Well, and the worst may be yet to come. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so Audrey Crane is recruited. And I go into that. That's the first section I'm going to read is her... she's in the cult. She's been given a rare moment where they're not occupying her time constantly. She, it's a sleep deprivation and constant work and study, and they have a 900-page holy book that their leader wrote in 3 days. Some say in his own blood. Now, there was a cult, I think, that said something like that. Mine, I don't say the bit about his own blood, but anyway, they keep her busy round the clock. She has had a rare moment when she's in bed and she's exhausted, but she doesn't want to fall asleep because she wants to remember how this started. It all happened so fast. I mean, it's like she's just teleported into another future time, and it's like she wanted to, how in the hell did all of this happen? And so that's what the first scene is that I go into that I would like to read for you. I hope we'll have time. This is 9 pages. I have a total of, I think, about 15 or 20 minutes of reading, but we'll see how it goes. Just, we just stop. I just hope you like it. I mean, it's been getting great response. But so, to set the stage for the scene, Audrey Crane has abruptly left her family home the day before. The novel opens up with her basically splitting from the family home where she had been living. I mean, I don't go into, whether or not, or how long she's been living with her mother, but she's been sharing a house with her mother. And this memory sequence is from just the day before. She left her family home, having shaved her head, and informed her mother that her name was now Prendeben. Through networking, Audrey's fiancé, Matthias Pleasant, that's a very common last name, and I wanted to have some fun with that because he's in this very grim situation, and he has this name, Pleasant.
Yeah.
And it turned out with keeping the book short enough, that was one of the things that got cut. So anyway, I hope people don't just think that it's goofy to have the guy with a name like that, but he does. There are some sections where I have a little fun with it. Anyway, Audrey's fiancé, Matthias Pleasant, has made contact with a cult educator, Charles Bienville. And, I see. I did this out of order. This is not the memory sequence, but this is where he's... Let me read this one first. I think it flows better in this order. We will get to the memory sequence. So this is their first meeting. Charles is trying to chip away at the monumental ignorance Matt has about cult realities, which I say is no more than the average person would have, frankly. And I went over the fact that he was in the military police. I talked about all of that. Now, at this moment, he is in a state of high emotion, as this whole thing only just happened the day before, and he was discharged from the army the day before, which is not unconnected. The cult knew that she was going to be getting married, and also there was a small matter of a little jewelry collection that she owns that a former boyfriend of hers who had joined the cult told them all about it. So that was their impetus for giving a special push towards recruiting Audrey. It wasn't a vast collection, but it was just enough to get their attention. Okay, Matt is not entirely trusting of this guy as he enters his home, secluded rural home, and makes his acquaintance. He was expecting a James Bond villain, or he didn't know what to expect, and it turns out to be just an elderly, obese, and kind of fragile gentleman.
I love Charles. Charles is my favorite character, I think.
Good. I'm glad you did. I'm glad that was communicated. Matt took a seat at the polished wooden table, only just then taking in the shocking frailty of the elderly fellow, but he spoke in a distinguished, eloquent manner like an old-time radio announcer. For decades, my life's work has been the study of groups like the one Miss Crane is involved with, Bienville said. His use of her name threw Matt for just a second. I was able to help my wife and 2 of her relatives out of a similar organization in Korea, he said. These days I don't get around as well, but the work continues. Matt said, anything you can tell me, go for it. Anything at all. Right now, I could not be more in the dark. Charles says, I only spoke briefly to Craig about your situation. I bet he described me as an expert. I called myself a researcher. I say there can only be so much expertise on the human mind. Anyway, I'm not a trained psychiatrist or psychologist. I can tell you that Miss Crane will be needing a specialist like that when she gets out. That was hard to hear, but Matt gave a nod and continued with the listening. The old dude went right along. First off, you need to know that she was not drugged and abducted, as he thought. Not exactly. It is more accurate to say she has been deceived and taken in by a con game. Highly sophisticated, but that's the root of it, charlatanism. The organization is pyramidal, with the people at the bottom being generally decent but deceived and deluded, and the higher up you go, the more insidious it gets. With a bit more emphasis, he drove home his point. She has been drawn into a complex deception, and her entire life is now sidetracked. The only question is for how long. Groups like this, they come in a spectrum of severity, he said. Some are worse than others, okay? At the benign end, they're merely a waste of time, though benign can always turn malignant. At the other end of the dial, it can mean the total destruction of a person, psychologically, physically, financially. In sudden sadness, he looked down into the wood grain of the table, sighed, shook his bearded head, and said, Mountain of Radiance. That's one of the bad ones. So what's it all about? Matthias exclaimed. What do? They grow, said Charles. They metastasize and expand. They extract money and free labor from their followers and feed them a head trip in return. And then the new followers recruit and recruit and recruit. They have to keep bringing in new followers because they burn up the existing ones. Look, understand, it's a top-down totalitarian society living parasitically in a democracy. Worldwide, they have about 100,000 active adherents. They claim 20 million. Matt was rocked by the size of this group that he had never heard of and figured was no bigger than the ragtag bunch that had carried Audrey out of his life. They're a little hard to categorize, Charles says. Religious, for sure, sort of mystical New Age, though they always claim to be scientifically verified. They co-opt bits and pieces from other groups and traditions. They have holy texts and a messianic father figure and layers of high lamas beneath him down to the local level. They are entirely male-dominant and fascistic. There is a significant paramilitary wing. They control about $1 billion worth of real estate and businesses, tax-free. They have tentacles in government, business, academia, pop culture, anything lucrative or powerful. They've been around for 40 years. They claim 50. Only in the last 20 have they emerged as the powerhouse they are. They've gone through several stages of evolution. I'll give you more on their history some other time. About 15 years ago, they came up with a new doctrinal commandment involving the fertility of the group. They wanted bigger families amongst the adherents. Artificial insemination with sperm of ascended masters and their grand poobah, Ernest Seamark, became a big thing. His voice weakened as he went further into their fertility and family-building fixation. He then hunched over a bit, looked into the wood grain again, and brought himself to say, women are basically baby factories in this cult. Matthias recoiled internally, just noticeably to those assembled. From a chair in the corner, Blaine glanced grimly at him and respectfully looked away. The Reverend Moultrie stood, arms folded with a foot braced against a radiator, observing and appraising his reactions. Jean Kyon was evaluating the visitor as well in stoic silence, clearly grasping all the English and all of the ramifications of the scene before her. Matthias was roiling inside, thinking, what are they doing to her right now? Charles said, they won't immediately pair her off with a husband until higher authorities determine who that should be. And anyway, she has to prove herself first. There is a period of solidifying her adherency. They live in communal dorms with other new members, gender segregated, until it is decided she can be married and live out in society. She would be required to live in celibacy from the time of her initiation ceremony until such time as that. The room went miserably quiet for a minute or two. Charles then said that the recruitment process involved something he called sphere rules. So the infinite eternal field of sphere rules and guardian angels, space aliens, and Matt cried out, now hold up. Audrey has an intellect like nobody I know. No shortage of willpower either. There is no way she would ever fall for hokum like this. She was drugged. You were in the military police, I believe, Charles calmly said. Are you at all familiar with judo? Taken aback, yet again, Matt affirmed it. Charles continued, then you know that with the right training and practice, a 10-year-old kid can throw you across the room, right? Okay, this is psychological judo. Audrey's strengths have been identified and used against her. Virtually anyone is susceptible. It just has to be the right time, the right approach, and the right cult. There's a definite luck factor, too. Mind control doesn't always take, and it doesn't always last for long when it does. It's not perfect, like in the Manchurian Candidate. That's why they recruit nonstop. Their burnout rate is over the moon. But sure, Audrey was a potential recruit. Anybody is. So don't blame her for what happened. There is a mind control cult for every demographic, thousands of them. Bienville apparently felt it was a moment to pause and allow that to be digested. Matt could feel droplets of sweat on his forehead. His muscles were tremulous. At least he wasn't sobbing like a toddler, which is what he really wanted to do, but not in front of these guys. After a long moment, Charles said, can you imagine having your identity supplanted by that of another? I don't mean having a mentor. This is psychological parasitism. It's like a foreign object or machine inserted into the consciousness, a man-made thing, faulty and buggy, but an intrusive system placed into the normal workings of the mind. In my book, I call mind control the Contraption. His book sat on the table in view of Matthias. The title was The Manufacture of Mental Illness. How much time do you want me to have for the... Do I keep going? Just let me know, okay?
It's so good. Please. I will maybe another 5 or 10 minutes and then we can round up with some finishing questions.
Okay. Well, I brought too much to read then. Okay, I'll just go. You just let me know. Charles said it doesn't matter how intelligent Audrey is. Do cults sound crazy? Cults have to sound crazy. They would not offer an alternative to reality otherwise. They cannot be grounded in the real world. They are selling an all-new paradigm, a new worldview. People leave reality for one thing or another every day. Not every such move is as disastrous as escaping into Mountain of Radiance. In a clear voice that carried, Matthias said, Audrey had nothing to escape from. Charles said she may have been convinced otherwise. Operations like this are dishonesty incarnate. They justify the lies by saying that it is for the overall good of the downfallen people who can't yet handle truth. Milk before meat, they say. Craig Moultrie spoke up to say that maybe the deception was not about how bad her current life was, but rather the superhuman wonder world that awaited her in Mountain of Radiance. That was how they worked on the people he knew. He said Matt should understand that he didn't lose Audrey to another man. He lost her to an almighty God, or what was sold to her as one. Matt said he hadn't lost her at all. He insisted that he still needed a better idea of how she got pulled in to begin with, for the sake of his own mental health. There was no hint this was coming. It was like getting hit by a car. Old Bienville drew and released a deep breath and launched into it. The initial approach typically involves flattery and a feigned interest in something she was passionate about. In this case, it looks like a special effort was made to recruit her, likely because of that jewelry box, he said. Somehow they found out about that. The typical Mountain of Radiance recruit has their first introduction online, though or through some ego stroking from recruiters working the street. Then there would come the spacey talk about your place in the universe, leading up to the sphere rule shuffle, which I will tell you about. And finally, you get the hard sell at live seminars. Anybody who balked going further would be told that having sphere rule connections without the follow-up training would bring about a ruinous pivot in their life. Bringing one's mind into conjunction with the sphere rules is really the beginning of Mountain of Radiance adherency. It's all just self-hypnosis and guided imagery. That might be a good stopping point for that. If we only going to do another few minutes. So we'll see.
I see so much of your knowledge and experience just in those few pages of the way that it's explained on the name changes and the reproductive coercion and the slow burning of manipulation and the recruitment and the retainment methods, which are then used to, go out and recruit more people and, just lying about how many numbers there are in a group and how long they've been around for. It's absolutely incredible. And I was so invested in all of the characters throughout the whole book. And it got really tense towards the end because the way that you laid the book out, having different characters be the focus point of each chapter, but then It got closer and closer together. So it was like you were over here with somebody for a little while, and then over here, and then over here, and then it was just like here, and then here, and then here, and it was faster and faster and faster that you were.
And they're all
different.
They're all talking about each other, and they're separated. This is a couple that was about to get married, and now they're torn apart. They're separated, and the point of view goes from one to the other. Really, it's only their 2 points of view, but then there are supporting characters. This is probably going to be my big contribution to the counter-cult effort. But
it's so great. I mean, and I'm not going to give any spoilers away, but it's definitely worth picking up the book and kind of because the pre-context given in the part of the book before you just started your read, and then all the way through to the end. The ending is really kind of like what people should stick around for if they do pick up a copy of The Contraption and give it a read. And if you do, listeners, I say this all the time, please get in touch with me and let me know, because I'd love to have a chat with you about your thoughts and feelings on Bart's book, The Contraption, because I've read it and I'd love to compare notes.
Terrific. I'm so thrilled to hear that. And if you do read it and you whatever you think about it, I hope you'll leave a review on Amazon or otherwise. Just talk it up in social media, because I don't have a $10 million promotional budget, folks, but I have a hell of a book. So
The Mountain of Radiance, are we going to learn more about them in the future, or do you think that that's where you're going to leave that story?
Well, people have been saying you should write a sequel. I don't know. So much went into this. I don't know. I mean, I describe their history and so forth. I don't describe how, what may come down the road for them. Basically, right. I wanted them to serve as an example of what can happen out there. Mm-hmm. So, one of the ways of reaching someone under cult mind control is to show them the same tactics that are being used against them being used by another cult.
Right.
And then they make that connection, Well, Mountain of Radiance is checking every box in the pattern. So they are the consummate cult. And, I often wondered if maybe I didn't go too far with it, but I've been told, and I know from my own reading, there are some out there that are every bit as bad. And, I mean, we haven't had, the Mountain of Radiance hasn't had a mass suicide, so, maybe they're not even the worst.
There's also a kind of callback to something you said before about how the kind of the ripple effect and the factions that kind of go on to continue the devastating abuse against human populations. I mean, when I talk about Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh and his inner circle and how once he was no longer leading such a significant cult movement, some of those inner circle members went on to start their own branches of what are still continuing to be exploitative spaces. So, right. I mean, when you talk about the ripple effect in that way, who knows what the ripple effect of the Mountain of Radiance will be in that particular universe.
Well, there were, I did mention something about splinter groups that have already taken off. But, when I was talking about ripple effects, I was just talking about how, if a cult member is so exploited and abused and damaged, well, we're all sort of connected, aren't we? I mean, the connections with a distant stranger can be pretty tenuous, but there's even some kind of a connection, depending on what happens. There could be a connection with a distant stranger, but certainly the people in your community, I mean, if somebody is wiped out by a cult, that affects the community. And the closer that the people are to that person, the more they are affected. So it's not just the actual person who was recruited that was damaged.
Yeah. And it's so difficult to combat on so many different levels, especially right now. You mentioned before that kind of cults and the way that they present, they kind of change and they develop over time. So we might not be talking so much about communist China anymore, like the experts were in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And we might not even be talking about cults in the way that they presented and still present in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s with things like the Branch Davidians and the People's Temple. We're now talking about digital and online spaces and the way that people are being recruited in the same coercive way, but without being in physical proximity to another person.
Right.
The tactics still have the same impact and the same effect. So it's kind of now like a waiting game on cult experts to release the next pieces of research and of writing to kind of be like, how what do we do next?
Well, and I think we're well behind the curve, of course. And cult education struggles along, underfunded. It's a bunch of former members. What I say is, if this whole effort is to be left to former members, it's over.
Yeah. It
has to be
on a macro level. It could destroy the world.
It could destroy civilization, yeah, and by extension, maybe the world. But the average person has to get up to speed on this. It's not a small problem, and it's multifaceted. We've talked about earlier that at the micro level, it's domestic abuse. At the macro level, it's totalitarian dictatorships. You had just mentioned China. They're developing AI now. Are they developing AI to advance mankind? I don't think so. Probably a lot of corporations and people that are developing it are not doing it with any kind of, hopes of advancing the human race. They're doing it for their own ends. And scary is not the word. And hey, maybe we're too late. The genie may be out of the bottle. I don't know. Maybe freedom of mind is doomed. I don't know. But obviously we can't act like it is. We have to keep pushing and try to get more people to take a look at what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
Hate to take them away from their video game, The 2 hours or 3 hours that it would take to read a novel, that's prime video game time, I don't know. I see a lot of apathy. That's what I see. And just cynicism and fatalism. And I feel some of it myself, but you can't give in to it.
No. I do recognize a lot of that kind of apathetic approach in the way that I was before I started this podcast as well, before I started having conversations with people that have really experienced these things, and then making those connections that probably everybody around me has experienced some type of coercive control or undue influence to some degree at some point in their lives. I
think so too.
That have experienced it to a severe degree in a domestic setting, and I've never made the connection that until recently, that those same experiences are being had by people in high demand groups and cults, and also in settings like gangs, modern slavery cases, human trafficking cases, workplace coercion, sports coercion. And I thought it was really interesting to read about the premise of another book that you've written, Painter of the Heavens, which is about con artistry and scamming.
Right. And I investigate in that book. I investigate the ambiguity that sometimes exists with these cult leaders as to, in other words, it's a con man who he has formed a relationship with this woman. He is plotting a outrageous forgery scheme. He has forged a historical document, which was going to be net millions at auction, he thinks. And he has this new girlfriend. He wants her to be part of it. So he is controlling her. He is trying very hard. And I could really get into the psychology of that situation in this book. It's called Painter of the Heavens. It's only available as an ebook. This was from years ago that I wrote it, but I'm very proud of it. And it, as I mentioned to you earlier, I think before we started here, it turns out that a lot of my writing deals with themes of undue influence and manipulation and control. I have another novel that I'm holding in reserve until I can figure out this whole crazy book business with the promotions and this and that, if there is any figuring out to do. But this one, the person who is being victimized by undue influence is a young man. I don't want anybody to think that I view that this is strictly a female thing. But in Painter of the Heavens, the woman is sort of she's manipulated. She rebels against it. There's a real dynamic going on there. I think it illustrates the psychology of that really well. And I've had a lot of great feedback on it. But I think it is right. I think it's maybe the best writing, the actual literary craftsmanship, so to speak, that I've done. I need to haul it out and put it out in print form, but
absolutely. I'd love to see it in print form. I'm gonna definitely put links to both the books and to your Amazon, because I know you have 2 Amazon pages as well. So I'll put links to both of those in the episode description. I just wondered if you could tell the listeners why some of your books have one name on them and some of your books have another.
Oh, my author name. Yeah. So not the title, but the author name is different. Only with the Contraption have I used my full name. My other books were written under the name Bart Stewart. And so on the Contraption, it's Barton Allen Stewart. And somebody said to me, Edgar Allan Poe sold a lot more books with his full name than back when he was calling himself Ed Poe.
Sorry, that's a great one. So I'll make sure I put links to all of the different places where people can purchase a copy of the Contraption and Painter of the Heavens. I loved what you said before we hit record about how the themes of each of your books fit to a glove when it comes to talking about undue influence. So if anybody is looking for fiction in terms of looking at the subject of cults and undue influence and coercive control, I so highly recommend Bart's writing. It's easy to read, but it's obvious that you have like years and years of so much knowledge to do with this subject. And sometimes when I'm reading memoirs and I'm watching documentaries and I'm doing research on this subject, it can get a bit heavy and it can get difficult. So it was actually at times a relief to remind myself that what I was reading in your book was fiction, because it easily could have been somebody's true story of just really not all parts of it. I don't maybe with some cold cases maybe. But just reading parts of it and it felt stressful, and then I'd remind myself, oh, this is fiction, and then it would be a bit easier to read in that sense of kind of anxiety, a little bit of stress. I do get that with memoirs, and then I remind myself that the person is okay because they've written a book. So I know that by the time
I know what you mean. You're right. I felt that way before reading a memoir. But I wanted the contraption to be an educational tool. I wanted to be used for people who don't know anything about cults. It may not even be a book for a former cult member. They know all this. I think they would find it an intriguing story, and I've had some great feedback from former cult members. But I wanted this to be an educational tool for people who have, maybe head off some damage. Let them get a cautionary tale. This, rather than nonfiction, fiction, it shows the dynamics of cult psychology being acted out. So it's like a movie. And I think it would make a hell of a movie, by the way.
Yeah,
but
I do too, yeah.
Yeah, that's what Painter of the Heavens.
It would be nice to see a contribution to movies and media that isn't salacious and over sensationalized and actually just depicts cults as groups of people that meet in fields and wear white dresses and kind of float around and do strange rituals together. It would be great to actually see a cult depicted in the way we understand them to exist, and the way that we understand them to operate as well, in terms of recruiting people in, and the way that people are born and raised in them as well, which is something that the Contraption highlights also.
Yeah, right. There were some characters that were. And, I hate to sound paranoid, but the fact that there's not such... The fact that the cult education, and be it nonfiction or fiction, is not any further along than it is, may not be a total accident, I mean, they're not... Cultic groups are not interested in being exposed.
No.
So there may be something happening behind the scenes that, I mean, again, I don't want to be paranoid because I don't think that's productive at all. But I mentioned earlier, I don't know if we had started recording yet, but I think it's pretty clear that cults do lobbying of the U.S. Congress. And they are certainly dedicated in their work. So who knows? Maybe they find ways to limit cult education.
I don't know. I mean,
it's all the more reason for us to get active in doing cult education.
Yeah. It's like you say, it's not helpful to be paranoid, but sometimes you wonder if that's the only logical reason. I mean, this stuff's been happening for centuries and it's still happening, and we're still kind of like looking at the same kind of 20 people to help us understand what cults are.
And we're so blasé about it, and it's this gigantic problem.
Yeah. So what's in the future for you, Bart? You said you've got a book that you're holding on to at the moment. Do you have any other projects in the pipeline?
Not right now. I'm still working on getting the Contraption some notice. And gosh, it's just been so daunting. Not to sound like I'm whining here, but I definitely appreciate this opportunity, Casey. I appreciate you having me on. Usually I just get ghosted by podcasters and interviewers and the radio and magazines. Anybody, nothing. They don't want to hear about it. They don't even, they don't even say no. It's just, so, and I think I have something of value here. I think I have something to say here.
I absolutely think so.
Apparently it's not something they're interested in. They're interested in, the hairstyle of the bass player for the Maroon Magoos or whatever, So the priorities are in place, is what I'm saying. And as far as my future plans, people keep telling me who've read this book saying they would love to see a sequel to this. I don't know if I'm going to do that or not, but I do have this book that I'm holding in reserve. It's about a young man. He's very idealistic. He's an artist, and he's something of a dreamer, to say it the very least. But he's a beautiful soul, young guy, and circumstances have put him into this very corrupt small town in rural North Carolina. I have a little trademark. Most of my writing is set in North Carolina. That's where I was.
Yeah, it's not that culty in that part of America, is it?
Are you kidding?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, it is. It's a theocracy. De facto theocracy.
Yeah.
But that's fundamentalist religion, so that doesn't count as a cult. Only people in saffron robes are cultic, right? Well, anyway, my character ends up in this very corrupt, amoral town that is run by these old families. And so this is very cliquish, strata, pyramidal, cult-like, but it's old families that dominate this little community. Anyway, so that's the psychological setup for that. He's there with them, and they're working on him. And the title is The Year of Cannon Hills. So I always liked that title, and I hope to bring it out someday. Probably self-published.
I hope you do. I really enjoy your writing, and
Thank you, Casey.
To ask you before we say goodbye and sign off today. You've talked about the reception for the contraption and some feedback that you've had from cult survivors and other people that work in the space. There was also some awards that you were shortlisted for, if that is correct.
I don't think for the contraption. For my first book, I won a finalist prize in the National Indie Excellence Awards. That was years ago.
I was looking at, yeah.
Yeah. Now, the contraption, it hasn't been out a full year. I'm thinking about entering it in some contest, but right now I'm just trying to get noticed for it. I'm just trying to, I'm running ads, and that's not the way to do it. It's funny, I go do a book signing at a bookstore, and I sell like a copy every 10 or few, in others, better than every 10 minutes. I'm signing a copy. I'm talking to people, and I'm writing people, and it's like one after another. I don't think I've ever had a line standing there, but it's like one after another. But you can't sell thousands of books in person. So I have to find some way to reach out, and it's like I say, it's book promotion.
Yeah, we're going to do what we can. I'm going to put all of the episode description. I'll put
Thank you,
for my social media, and I'm hoping that before you know it, there'll be some of the listeners leaving reviews about their experiences of reading the contraption. And I really appreciate the opportunity to read it too. I actually get myself a copy of Painter of the Heavens because I really enjoy your writing.
It's only an ebook. But I didn't know you would love it. Yeah. And until then, this is the contraption. And at the top there it says, mind control is the ultimate pitfall, and mind control is the contraption. And there's a statement in there that explains why that's the title. Charles Bienville describes mind control as being a contraption.
I love Charles. He's my favorite character. People should read The Contraption just for Charles, I think.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you so much, Bart. I hope that you enjoyed the rest of your day, and I'm going to be looking out for more of your work in the future.
I'll keep you posted.
Take care. Bye.
You too, Casey. Bye-bye.